Hi, do you struggle to communicate in German effectively? This course will help you with that. The focus is business German, but is really helpful for anyone who wants to improve on their German. I've made the course so that each of the lessons is 15 minutes long, so that it is really bite-sized for you. It's not too long, and after each lesson there will be an exercise for you to cement the learnings that we did. What can you expect from this course? Once you're done with this course, you are more confident in a professional conversation in German. This includes negotiations, job interviews, but also just meetings and writing emails as well. Your grammar will be trained so that you know how to say something that sounds more polite, more professional in German. After you've done this course, your professional German will be much better. If this sounds good for you, then enroll in the course and start learning with me. Hello and welcome. This is the first installment of the vocabulary lessons that we need throughout the whole course. So I will teach you here the foundational vocabulary that is important for you to understand the sentences, work with the sentences, and also generally to improve your vocabulary, especially in the field of career improvement and also your daily life. So let's go and start with the vocabulary number one. So here we have the organization chart, which I would like to use as the guidelines throughout our vocabulary lessons. This can really be any organization chart of any company. I'm sure there are also a couple of departments that I might miss here, or at least don't put as much emphasis on. But the most important thing is that we learn the vocabulary that is useful for you in your career and also daily life. Okay, so we start with die Geschäftsführung, that is the managing directors. So that is actually die Führung, that is so the leadership. Yeah, so that is not plural, but it is feminine in this case. Der Geschäftsführer, however, would be the CEO or the managing director. So then we have the finance department, die Finanzabteilung. And in the finance department, we have das Controlling, the controlling, pretty easy, and die Buchhaltung, the accounting, which some people think is one of the most boring jobs there is. And then we go up again. We have das Personalwesen, which is usually referred to as the HR department, the human resources department. Then we have der Vertrieb, which really includes everything that includes the distribution. So that means das Marketing, the marketing, also pretty easy, and der Verkauf, the sales, which is oftentimes the salespeople or business development people that are talking face to face to the clients to acquire new customers. And then we have die Produktion, the production, die Produktion. For this session, I'd like to focus on the Geschäftsführung, the finance department, die Finanzabteilung, das Controlling, and die Buchhaltung. So let's start with die Geschäftsführung. The first vocabulary that I would like us to learn is auf Geschäftsreise sein, to be on a business trip. That's a pretty common thing. Der Geschäftsführer ist auf einer Geschäftsreise. So here we can see that we also use the dative case after auf, because auf is a two-way preposition, and we can ask where is the CEO. He is on a business trip, not where to. So auf Geschäftsreise sein is the first one. The second one is die Sekretärin or der Sekretär, which is actually, the first one is feminine, so the female secretary, die Sekretärin, and then masculine would be der Sekretär, the male secretary, or you just say the secretary. Der Geschäftsführer hat eine sehr gute Sekretärin. The CEO has a very good secretary. We could say that. So that's the second one I would like you to learn, also masculine and feminine here both. Then we have der Geschäftsführer unterschreibt den Vertrag. So here we have the accusative case. So usually it is just masculine der Vertrag, which is the contract. The CEO signs the contract or a contract. So this is the third one, der Vertrag, the contract. And unterschreibt, unterschreiben, to sign something. That's maybe also good for you to know. The next one is der Geschäftsführer leitet das Unternehmen. Das Unternehmen is the company. So the CEO leads the company. And also here we say der Geschäftsführer leitet das Unternehmen. We usually don't say der Geschäftsführer führt das Unternehmen. You could say that, but most of the time we would say leitet. And the last one, die Abteilung, the department. Das Unternehmen besteht aus verschiedenen Abteilungen. Das Unternehmen besteht aus verschiedenen Abteilungen. The company consists of various departments. This is the last one, so let's try to recap the ones that we have already learned. Auf Geschäftsreise sein, die Sekretärin, der Sekretär, der Vertrag, das Unternehmen, die Abteilung. All right, what was the translation for the first one? Auf Geschäftsreise sein. Correct, to be on a business trip. Next one, die Sekretärin, der Sekretär. Yes, this one is actually quite easy. The secretary, in this case, the first one female, the second one male. Der Vertrag. The contract. Das Unternehmen. The company. And die Abteilung. The department. All right, let's go to the next chapter, die Finanzabteilung, the finance department. Die Finanzabteilung, the finance department. You can here also see well that we like to connect two words together in German and make one long word out of that. So just imagine you have those two separate words and then you can make your speaking pause there. So I'm not saying Finanzabteilung, I say Finanzabteilung. That makes it a lot easier to say those long words. Die Finanzabteilung kümmert sich die Steuern. The finance department takes care of the taxes. So die Steuer is the tax. So the tax that you have to pay to the government every month or every year. Der Angestellte schreibt eine Rechnung. Die Rechnung is the invoice. The employee writes an invoice. Die Rechnung. Das Unternehmen macht Gewinn. Der Gewinn, the profit. The company makes profit. Das Unternehmen macht Gewinn. Das Unternehmen macht Verlust. The company makes a loss. Der Verlust, the loss. Der Zinssatz ist sehr niedrig. The interest rate is very low. Der Zinssatz is the interest rate. Der Zinssatz. Sometimes we also just say der Zins. Yeah, you can also say that. Okay, so now I would like you to translate this text into German. Please pause here, take a white sheet of paper and translate that text into German. It uses all of the words that we just learned in this department. And then I will tell you the answer in a moment. And the answer is this. Da das Unternehmen hohe Steuern zahlen muss, macht es weniger Gewinn. Der Zinssatz ist niedrig, deshalb sind Investitionen leichter. Der letzte Die letzte Investition war allerdings ein großer Verlust. Die Rechnungen waren leider zu hoch. So even if you don't have exactly the same what I wrote, I hope at least that your text was somehow remotely similar to the way how I wrote this. Certainly the words that we just learned. Okay, let's come now to the third department, das Controlling. Das Controlling. Die Kennzahl ist sehr wichtig. The KPI or the metric is very important. So if you talk about KPIs in an office, in German we would say die Kennzahl. Die Kennzahl. Kennzahlen sind wichtig für Vergleiche. KPIs are important for comparisons. Der Vergleich. The comparison. Der Vergleich. Das Verhältnis zwischen Gewinn und Verlust ist gut. The ratio between profit and loss is good. Das Verhältnis, the relationship, or you can also use that for relationship. Das Verhältnis. Okay, so please pause here and allocate the right words to the right translation. And this is the answer. Das Verhältnis is the ratio, die Kennzahl is the KPI, the metric, and the comparison is der Vergleich. So in this department, we just had 3 vocabularies because I don't want this to be too long. And now we come to the next one, die Buchhaltung, the accounting. Die Buchhaltung. If you think about it, that word actually means the book keeping, like literally you're like keeping or holding a book. Der Buchhalter erstellt eine Rechnung. The accountant creates an invoice. Der Buchhalter, die Buchhalterin. Do you see the in at the end of the word der Buchhalter? That makes it female. And then you also have to change the article to die Buchhalterin, the male accountant and the female accountant. Die Buchhalterin erstellt eine Bilanz. Die Buchhalterin erstellt die Bilanz. The accountant creates the balance sheet. Die Bilanz, the balance sheet. Das Unternehmen hat hohe Verbindlichkeiten. The company has high debts. Die Verbindlichkeit, the debt, die Verbindlichkeit. And the last one, das Personalwesen, the HR department. Das Personalwesen, the Human Resources Department. Die Probezeit ist 3 Monate. The trial period is 3 months. Die Probezeit, the trial period. Die Probezeit. Das Bewerbungsgespräch dauert 1 Stunde. Das Bewerbungsgespräch dauert 1 Stunde. The job interview takes 1 hour. Das Bewerbungsgespräch, the interview. Das Bewerbungsgespräch. Ich habe gestern meine Kündigung eingereicht. Ich habe gestern meine Kündigung eingereicht. I submitted my resignation yesterday. Die Kündigung, the termination or resignation. Die Kündigung. Hi, I hope you found these vocabulary helpful. They will be with us throughout the whole course, so try to memorize them or at least write them down, because I will use them throughout the whole of the course. So let's do a little quiz now so that we can really cement those new vocabularies that we just learned. So in this lesson, we will talk about relative pronouns. Relative pronouns are related to relative clauses and can sometimes be a little bit difficult. In this lesson, we will learn how to properly identify those relative clauses and how to work with the relative pronouns. I will give you steps to identify which relative pronoun you have to use. I will give you a table and we will also do examples. So let's go and start the lesson. Okay, so here is an example of a sentence that uses relative pronouns. Ich sehe den Vertrag, den ich gestern unterschrieben habe. I see the contract that I signed yesterday. This den, in this case, you could think, okay, that just looks like a normal article, maybe the accusative masculine article. But actually, in this case, we have a relative pronoun. And this is what we will learn today, how we exactly use those relative pronouns and how to identify them. So here is the sentence a little bit more structured. The first part is the main clause, or in German der Hauptsatz. Ich sehe den Vertrag. The second part is the relative clause, the sentence that adds additional information to the noun. So I could just say, I see the contract, period, and that's it. But I want to say something more about the contract. And I want to say that I see the contract, but I also want to say I see the contract who I signed yesterday, yeah, or that I signed yesterday. And that's the relative pronoun. Why do we have relative pronouns? We want to be able to say or give additional information about a noun without having to start the sentence all over again. So what are the rules that we need to have? The first one is the conjugated verb always goes to the end of the relative clause. I will show you what I mean by that later. And the second rule is we need to identify the right relative pronoun. Okay, so here again, identify the right relative pronoun. That was the second rule. And how do we do that? We need to find the case that the relative pronoun should be in, and the gender of the noun that we actually want to exchange, that we relatively want to exchange. So here is the example sentence that we heard earlier again. Ich sehe den Vertrag, den ich gestern unterschrieben habe. So the first rule that I said is we need to find out the gender. And here you can see that we need to find out the gender of the Vertrag, the word that we relatively want to exchange. So we have masculine, der Vertrag changes to den Vertrag. In this case, ich sehe den Vertrag, because it's accusative. And then den ich gestern unterschrieben habe, the den is in the accusative, but it is not in the accusative because of den Vertrag. It is in the accusative because of the relative clause and how the Vertrag is there situated. So I could say, ich habe den Vertrag gestern unterschrieben. And in that case, the contract, der Vertrag, den Vertrag, is in the accusative case. So here is another example. Ich habe das Unternehmen gekauft, das in Europa ist. I bought the company, or I have bought the company that is in Europe. So here you can see the relative clause is the das in Europa ist, and the main clause is ich habe das Unternehmen gekauft. As I said, rule number one is that you have to put the conjugated verb at the end of the relative clause. And here the conjugated verb is ist. Yeah, so because ist needs to be conjugated based on the noun, and in this case here we have the noun das Unternehmen. Das Unternehmen ist in Europa. We could exchange das, the red das, for the blue das Unternehmen. And then we would have a perfectly normal sentence. Ich habe das Unternehmen gekauft, das in Europa ist. Yeah, so das Unternehmen is here neutral, and we need to figure out the case. And the case of the relative pronoun here is the subject, because I could rewrite only the relative clause as a completely normal sentence, and then that would be das Unternehmen ist in Europa. I could just say, ich habe das Unternehmen gekauft, full stop. Das Unternehmen ist in Europa. But because I don't want to say that double, I can just say, ich habe das Unternehmen gekauft, das in Europa ist. So this is the whole table for the relative pronouns. On the top, you can see the genders as well as plural, and you can see on the right side nominative, accusative, dative, and genitive. What is interesting though is that you don't just see the der, die, das, you see also welcher, welche, and welches, and so on. When do we use der? When do we use der? When do we use welcher? That basically just depends on what you prefer to say. Most of the time, welcher, or this form, is used to not say der double. So there's sometimes a situation where you have to say die or der, and in those situations you just say welcher rather than der. If we then look a bit further down to dative, until then they look all like the normal articles that we have. But for the plural dative, it's instead of den, it's denen. Yeah, again, the plural dative is denen, not den. And in genitive, instead of des, it's dessen. Instead of der, it's deren. And then neutral again, dessen, and plural again, deren. So now an example sentence for you to figure it out. Please go back to the to the list that I just showed you, and maybe make a screenshot so that you can use to solve the next example sentences that we are going to do. Ich spreche mit dem Geschäftsführer. Das Unternehmen leitet. I speak to the CEO who runs the company. Which is the right answer here? And the right answer would be der. Ich spreche mit dem Geschäftsführer, der das Unternehmen leitet. Why is that? So, ich spreche mit dem Geschäftsführer, der das Unternehmen leitet. Geschäftsführer is masculine, and the case that we need to have for the relative pronoun here is the nominative case. Der Geschäftsführer leitet das Unternehmen. Okay, so let's do another example. Ich bin auf einer Geschäftsreise, auf ich viele Kunden treffe. I'm on a business trip where I meet a lot of clients or a lot of customers. Which relative pronoun do I have to put in here? A little tip, we have a preposition auf, and auf is a two-way preposition. And the right answer is der. Ich bin auf einer Geschäftsreise, auf der ich viele Kunden treffe. Why is that? Let's look into this sentence a little bit more in detail. Well, that's the same sentence, it just looks a little bit different. Ich bin auf einer Geschäftsreise, auf der ich viele Kunden treffe. So First, we want to figure out which gender we have for the noun that we want to relatively exchange. It is die Geschäftsreise, so it is feminine. And which case do we have for the relative pronoun? So we have here the preposition auf, and auf can be either accusative or dative. So look up the topic look up the topic two-way prepositions to figure out which is the right case here. Auf, in this case, we can ask where am I? And if I can ask where rather than where to, then we have the dative case. And the dative feminine relative pronoun changes to der. I could also alternatively say auf welcher ich viele Kunden treffe. So this is the same sentence just written into two sentences. Ich bin auf einer Geschäftsreise. I am on a business trip. Auf der Geschäftsreise treffe ich viele Kunden. On the business trip, I meet a lot of clients. Can you see the difference here? Yeah? So I'm basically I just exchanged der Geschäftsreise for der. Yeah. So I just put in the relative pronoun before, and the verb treffe comes here to the second spot in the sentence rather than to the last spot in the relative clause. Yeah. Okay, let's do another example. Der Mann, Job, kündigt wurde, freut sich auf einen langen Urlaub. The man whose job was determined is looking forward to a long holiday. Here, whose should give you a hint about which case we are talking. And the answer is dessen. And dessen is the genitive case. Der Mann, dessen Job gekündigt wurde, freut sich auf einen langen Urlaub. So der Mann is masculine, and we have the genitive case here because I could say der Job des Mannes wurde gekündigt. The job of the man was determined. So here we have the genitive case, and the genitive masculine relative pronoun is dessen. So please feel free to make a screenshot of this or save this somewhere or print it out, because it will be very helpful for you to do the tests after this lesson. So the table that I just showed you at the end is the most important thing for the relative pronouns. Please print that table, put it next to your desk, and make sure that you know it, that you learn that table. As you see, that table is relative similar to the normal articles, but there are some differences, and I want you to learn those differences. So now we do the quiz at the end of the lesson. Please take that table that I just showed you, put it next to you whilst you do the quiz answers. Okay, so now we are talking about the conjunctive 2 in particular. So this is a really important topic if you want to ask very polite questions, which is especially important for business German. And so you will learn today when to use it, because there are other ways how to use the conjunctive 2. Then we will learn how to use it, and then we will also have more examples, and I will show you different ways of how it can be applied. And at the end there will be a quiz. So let's go with the conjunctive. So let's talk about the conjunctive 2, the subjunctive 2. Here is an example sentence of how that would look like. Der Geschäftsführer würde gern Urlaub machen. The manager would like to take a vacation. So here we are expressing a dream or a wish. Der Geschäftsführer würde gern Urlaub machen. And with the würde and the machen, that is one of the keys to create the conjunctive too. So let's look at another example sentence. Ich würde dieser Person nicht vertrauen. I wouldn't trust this person. Here we use the conjunctive 2 to express a warning. So this is another way of how we can use the conjunctive 2. Why do we use the conjunctive 2? We use it to express hypothetical situations, wishes, dreams, possibilities, and warnings. And we also use it in the indirect speech when we can't use the conjunctive 1. As you might remember from the conjunctive 1, we use that for the indirect speech, but sometimes we cannot use the conjunctive 1 because there is no difference between the indicative and the conjunctive 1 or the normal version. And so then we use the conjunctive 2 as well. But oftentimes, or mainly, we use it for hypothetical situations like dreams, wishes, possibilities, and warnings, and also for very polite questions. So how do we form the conjunctive 2? There are two ways to do that. One is we use the würde plus infinitive. Infinitive means the plain version of the verb, like we had in the first sentence, or we create a conjunctive 2 version out of a verb, like finde, ich fände. And we look into those two ways now. So the first one, würde plus infinitive, is formed like this. So here you can see all the conjugations for würde. Ich würde, I would. Du würdest, you would. Er, sie, es würde, he would. Wir würden, we would. Ihr würdet, you plural, would. Sie würden, they would, or you formal would. And so here is an example sentence similar to what we had at the beginning. Ich würde diesem Vertrag nicht trauen. I wouldn't trust this contract. So here we use the würde plus the infinitive verb vertrauen. Vertrauen comes then to the very end of the sentence. And this is another way how we can use that sentence. Du würdest diesem Vertrag nicht vertrauen. So here we conjugate the würde, the would, based on the you. So that's the first way how we use it, and that's actually the most common way of how to say something in the conjunctive too, especially in the spoken German. And then the second way is this way where we form a conjunctive 2 form out of the verb. So here I'm just using the example of finden. You do that for most other verbs as well. So how do we do that? First, we take the verb, the normal version, the infinitive version. Then we create the Präteritum, the past version of that, which is in this case, ich finde, ich fand. Ich fand is the Präteritum. Then we add the conjunctive 2 ending, which we saw earlier. So then we put an I in there, ich fande, and then we change the vowel to an umlaut. So in this case we have an A, so that changes then to an Ä, ich fände. So this is how it looks like. First we have the infinitive verb, ich finde, then ich fand, then ich fande, and then ich fände. So this is how it would look like in a sentence. Ich fände es gut, wenn wir länger Urlaub hätten. So here we have so that means I think it would be good if we had a longer vacation. So finden here changes to ich fände, and haben uses the same logic. Ich habe, but we have actually the first person plural here. So wir haben, wir hatten, that's the Präteritum, and then wir hätten, we change the A to an Ä, to the umlaut. Yeah, so this is how we create the second form of the conjunctive to the second way. So here, this is maybe a little bit more helpful to see this table. Those are all the endings that I add at the end to create the conjunctive 2 form of the verb. Ich hätte, du hättest, er, sie, es hätte, wir hätten, ihr hättet, sie hätten. Okay, let's do a little exercise. I would sign the contract if I had all the information. I would sign the contract if I had all the information. And now your task is it to take a moment, pause this video, and think about how you would write this sentence in German. Maybe take a white sheet of paper and write that down. A little tip, the verb goes to the end in the subordinate clause. We have here a main clause and the subordinate clause because we have if in here. So the verb that is conjugated goes to the end. Yeah. Okay, so pause here and try to figure out the right answer. And the right answer is: Ich würde den Vertrag unterschreiben, wenn ich alle Informationen hätte. Okay, so maybe you don't have everything correct here exactly the way how I wrote it, but important is that you created the right würde and unterschreiben and the right hätte. So this has here actually both versions. It has the first version, ich würde, plus infinitive, and then the second version where we take the verb and create the conjunctive 2 form out of it. I hope you've learned a lot in the conjunctive 2 here. This is a very important topic, especially if you want to sound more eloquent. So really practice this. If you didn't understand all of it, then please rewind or watch the whole video again. If not, let's go to the quiz. So in this episode, we talk about adjective declinations or adjective endings. This is a very important topic because I realized that all of my clients, either beginners, intermediate, or very advanced German speakers, have problems with this topic, the adjective endings. It's really important that we tackle this topic at the very beginning and kind of unmask this problem, this mystery, and hopefully that you will feel a lot more comfortable with this topic, but also feel like that you have the theoretical foundation to really know how to tackle this difficult topic, adjective declinations. So let's go right into the topic. So what are adjectives? Adjectives are words that describe a noun more precisely. So examples here are sweet, red, and technical. So you want to be able to describe the noun more precisely, and for that we use adjectives. So now what are adjective endings? Those adjective endings are important to fit the adjective, to decline the adjective correctly for the noun. And we need to know 3 things. We need to figure out the gender of the noun, so masculine, feminine, neutral, or even plural. We need to figure out the case in which the noun is, nominative, accusative, dative, and genitive. And we need to figure out the article. What do I mean by the article? The article that is in front of the noun, or in this case then also in front of the adjective. And there we have definite and indefinite articles, and sometimes also no articles. Definite articles is the, like in German der, die, das, and so on. And indefinite articles are a, like ein, eine, einem, and so on. Okay, let's look at an example. Here in this table, we can see in the top line the gender, masculine, feminine, neutral, and plural. Then we see the nominative case, and we have an example phrase. Der neue Vertrag, the new contract. So let's use the system, the three things that we have to figure out. The gender, which here is the masculine gender, der Vertrag. We have the nominative case, and we have der. And der is a definite article oder ein bestimmter Artikel, so we put an E at the end. And for feminine and neutral, we actually in this case do exactly the same as well. So we have the feminine case, the feminine gender, we have the nominative case, and we have a definite article, die neue Chefin, so we put an E at the end of the adjective. Die neue Chefin is the new boss in German. And das neue Unternehmen in the neutral column, the new company, also gets an E at the end of the adjective. Only for plural, we put an EN at the end of the adjective. Die neuen Mitarbeiter, the new employees, we put an EN here. So we have the plural, we have the nominative case, and we have a definite article. Okay, so now is your turn. Can you figure out which adjective endings we have to put here in those example phrases? And here are the answers. So we put an E at the end of klug in the masculine column. Der Buchhalter is the accountant, which is male in this case. Der kluge Buchhalter means the smart or the intelligent accountant. We have masculine, we have the nominative case, and we have a definite article. For feminine, die kluge Sekretärin, we also put an E at the end. The smart secretary, feminine, nominative case, definite article. The same for the neutral column. Das kluge Ziel, the smart goal, but only in plural, die klugen Unternehmen, the smart companies. Here the adjective gets an EN at the end. So let's look at an example sentence. Die ganze Abteilung ist im Urlaub. The whole department is on holiday. So here we have to figure out the adjective ending. Which one do we have here? Okay, so you have to figure out the three things that we spoke about. First, you need to find out the gender. Die Abteilung is feminine. Die Abteilung, the department. The second thing, we have to figure out the case that the noun die Abteilung is in. Die Abteilung ist im Urlaub. Here, die Abteilung is in the nominative case. Why? Because it's the subject, and the subject is the person, animal, or thing that is doing the action, and that is always in the nominative case. So we know it's feminine, we know it's the nominative case. What is missing now? Exactly. Which article do we have? We have the definite article. We have die Abteilung, the department, not a department. And the ending then is die ganze Abteilung ist im Urlaub. Okay, another sentence. Die fleißig Mitarbeiter verdienen Geld. The hardworking employees earn money. All right, tell me what is the right ending that we have to put here at the end. And if you have figured out EN, then you are absolutely right. Why? Because die Mitarbeiter, we had that word earlier, means the employees, so plural. So we know already that this is plural. We are also in the nominative case because die fleißigen Mitarbeiter verdienen Geld. Here it's again in the nominative case because it's the subject. And we have a definite article, die Mitarbeiter, so we have to put in EN at the end of the adjective. Okay, so here we are looking at a table that looks similar to the first table, but with a difference. Now we look at the indefinite articles, die unbestimmten Artikel. So we have ein, eine, ein, and then for plural, there is no a. We can substitute that with kein, which means no. Okay, so let's look at the endings here. We can see that they are slightly different. For the nominative masculine, we have an ER. We have an ER, ein neuer Vertrag. You can maybe remember it a little bit like it comes from der Vertrag. You basically pull over the ending ER and put it at the end of the adjective. Für neue, für feminine, we put the E at the end because it's die Chefin. So we pull over the E from die to the end of the adjective. So it says eine neue Chefin, a new female boss. And then we have ein neues Unternehmen. Here we pull over the ES, not an AS from das Unternehmen, but an ES, ein neues Unternehmen. And then, as I already mentioned before, we don't have an ein for plural, but we could say no new employees. And here again, we put an EN at the end of the adjective. So, and here we have the table that shows the possessive pronouns or the Possessivpronomen. You can look at them in terms of adjective endings and adjective declinations in the same way you look at them when you think about indefinite articles. So as you can see, the adjectives are declined in the same way. Mein neuer Vertrag, my new contract, gets an ER at the end. Seine neue Chefin, his new boss, also gets an E at the end here, same as in the indefinite article ending. And unser neues Unternehmen, we put an ES here at the end, our new company. And plural also stays the same as always, EN at the end, ihre neuen Mitarbeiter. So here we have their new employees, also receives an EN at the end. Let's look at this example sentence. My hardworking employees earn money. What ending do I have to put here at the end of fleißig? And if you have figured out EN, then you're absolutely right. Why? Because we have the plural here. We have the possessive pronoun, which is like an indefinite article. Then we have the gender. In this case, the gender is not a gender, but we are having the plural. And we have the nominative case again. My employees earn money. My hardworking employees earn money. Here they are the person, animal, or thing that is doing the action is the subject, and that is always in the nominative case. Here we have the table for the adjective declinations, but the full table. And very important point is this is the adjective declination table for the definite articles. Yes, so when you have a definite article in front of the adjective, you can see here all the different cases on the left-hand side, and on the top you can see the genders. A very important point that I want to highlight is that dative and genitive all end with an EN. That is so easy to remember. I really would like you to think about that. Dative and genitive, the adjective endings are EN when you have a definite article, and also for plural. Now here we have the table that looks very similar, but there are differences. The first difference is that we talk about indefinite articles here. That is important. And now if you look into more detail, you can see that we have here the ER for masculine nominative. For the accusative, we have an en, and then feminine and neutral for nominative and accusative is the same. However, we have an es, not like in the definite articles where it is just an e. And again, dative and genitive all have an en as well as plural. So that makes it a lot easier for you to remember this table, because you kind of just need to learn half of it. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson so far. In the next one, we go into more detail in the adjective declinations, especially regarding cases, especially regarding the different articles, definite, indefinite, and no articles. But before we go to the next lesson, let's do a small quiz. Okay, so now in this lesson we focus on adjective endings, but in the accusative, dative, and genitive case. This is a little bit more difficult because we have 3 cases that we focus on, but very good news, the dative and the genitive case, as long as you have an article in front of the adjective ending is always en. How that exactly works, we will see in the lesson now. So let's go. So here we have the full table for the definite and indefinite articles. So when we have in front of the adjective that we want to decline, where we want to find the right ending, we can either decide to have a definite or an indefinite article in front. So this is the full table. You can see that it's almost the same except for the neutral. So we have, for the neutral, we have the adjective ending I for definite articles, für bestimmte Artikel, and indefinite articles für unbestimmte Artikel. And there we have an es. So den klugen Buchhalter, the smart accountant, die kluge Sekretärin, the smart secretary, das kluge Ziel, the smart goal, die klugen Unternehmer, the smart entrepreneurs. And then the same for the indefinite articles. However, for plural, we don't have an ein. We can exchange it for example, for kein. So keine klugen Unternehmer, no smart business people, no smart entrepreneurs. Okay, so now it's up to you. I give you a moment. Please fill out here the right adjective endings. Okay, and here are the answers. Den klugen Buchhalter, we have the masculine case, we have the accusative case, sorry, we have the masculine gender, we have the accusative case, and the last one, we have a definite article, so we put an en at the end. Then for feminine, we put an I, die kluge Sekretärin. For neutral, we put also an I, das kluge Ziel. For example, für das kluge Ziel, you can imagine putting a preposition in front that is always followed by the accusative. And for the last one, we have die klugen Unternehmer, the smart business people. Now we are looking at the indefinite articles. Here there is one difference, and that difference is the neutral. I give you a moment to complete this list. Okay, so we have einen klugen Buchhalter, we have eine kluge Sekretärin, and we have ein kluges Ziel, and keine klugen Unternehmer. Again, remember to use the 3 steps. Which gender does the noun have? Which case is the noun in? And what type of article do we have in front of the adjective? So now here we have an example sentence, and you have to figure out the right adjective ending as well. Der Bauarbeiter kauft ein Handy. the construction worker buys a small smartphone. And the answer would be kleines Handy. Why? First of all, what gender do we have? Das Handy. Handy is neutral. So we have the neutral gender. Which case do we have? What does the construction worker buy? A smartphone or a small smartphone. Was kauft der Bauarbeiter? Ein kleines Handy. So it's the accusative case. And we have an indefinite article. So instead of the E, we have an ES here. Okay, and another example is, ich erstelle einen Bericht für meinen Vorgesetzten. I create a report for my new boss. Vorgesetzten could also be line manager. Which ending do we have here? Okay, so für gives us the preposition that we have a accusative case. We have meinen Vorgesetzten, so that can really only be masculine. So we have der Vorgesetzte is masculine, and für meinen Vorgesetzten is masculine and the accusative case. And we have meinen, which is a possessive pronoun. And if you remember the lesson that we had before this one, we know that possessive pronouns are to be treated like indefinite articles. So the right ending is neuen, für meinen neuen Vorgesetzten. So, and we have the dative case now. The dative case is super simple, as I've mentioned already in the lesson before. When we have a definite article or an indefinite article in front of the adjective, we just put an en at the end. Like dem klugen Buchhalter, der klugen Sekretärin, dem klugen Ziel, den klugen Unternehmern, and then indefinite or unbestimmt, einem klugen Buchhalter, einer klugen Sekretärin, einem klugen Ziel, keinen klugen Unternehmern. Let's do an example sentence. Das Unternehmen gehört dem neuen Investor. The company belongs to the new investor. Which is the ending we have to put here? Yes, you are right. It is an en. Why? We have the investor, which is masculine. We have the dative case because of the verb gehören that always asks for the dative case. And we have dem, which is a definite article. But all of this actually doesn't matter because we just need to know that we have the dative case and that we have an article. It doesn't matter if it's indefinite or indefinite in front of the adjective, and we just put an en at the end. Let's do another one. Die Regierung überrascht mit einem hervorragend Plan. The government surprises with an excellent plan. Which ending do I have to put here? And again, we have an en. Why? Because we have the dative case and we have an article in front of hervorragend, in front of the adjective, and therefore we just need to put an en at the end and don't even have to think about it in more detail. At the end of this lesson, there will be a test again, so you can practice this a little bit more after this video. So, and now we come to the last case, the genitive case, and the genitive case is as easy as the dative case. As you can see here, we put an en everywhere as well, as long as we have an article, if definite or indefinite, in front of the adjective. Des klugen Buchhalters, der klugen Sekretärin, des klugen Zieles, der klugen Unternehmer. Eines klugen Buchhalters, einer klugen Sekretärin, eines klugen Zieles, einer klugen Unternehmer. Sorry, keiner klugen Unternehmer. Let's do an example. Ich mache die Arbeit meines neuen Kollegen. I do the job of my new colleague. Or I could also say, I do my new colleague's work. Which ending do I have to put here? We have to put an en. Why? Minus is a possessive pronoun again, and we can look at it as if it is an indefinite article. So we do have an article, or in this case, a possessive pronoun in front of the adjective. We have the genitive case because you do the work of the new colleague or of my new colleague. We have the genitive case. We have der Kollege minus neuen Kollegen, so masculine, and we have an article in front, so we just put an en. Let's do another one. Mein Chef wohnt nördlich des Großflusses. My boss lives north of the great river. Which ending do I have to put here at the end of Groß? Correct. We have to put an en at the end. Why? We have der Fluss, masculine. We have des, which is a definite article, and we have the genitive case, so we just put an en here at the end. Okay, so I hope you found this helpful and that you understood the adjective endings a lot better, especially with the different cases. Let's do the test to figure out if you've really understood today's lesson. So let's go and start with the test. And here are some more vocabulary lessons and some more phrases that I want to teach you. These are really important for you to build your basics and to improve your overall knowledge of the vocabulary in German, especially for career and daily life. So this is another lesson about vocabulary. Try to write them down, make notes of them, and try to memorize them. Flashcards are really helpful for you to continue to learn those. So let's go start with this lesson. So, and here we are with the second part of the vocabulary. We just continue with the departments of a company. Now we have der Vertrieb, the distribution department, that then splits out into das Marketing, the marketing department basically, and der Verkauf, the sales. But let's first look into der Vertrieb. Der Vertrieb, the distribution. The first vocabulary I really would like you to know, to learn, is der Kundenbetreuer, the account manager but male, and die Kundenbetreuerin, the female account manager. And then you could look into an example sentence like this one. Der Kundenbetreuer kümmert sich die Kunden. The account manager takes care of the clients. So I think that's a very important vocabulary to know if you talk about the distribution department, the sales department. The second one I would like you to know, there are actually kind of like two vocabularies in here. But the one I would like you to focus on is das Verkaufsgespräch, the sales pitch. So, but here, the sales pitch is actually not the 100% best translation, because das Verkaufsgespräch, it's more like a sales conversation rather than a sales pitch. But if we do a sales pitch, we oftentimes also talk about das Verkaufsgespräch. And the second vocabulary that is also in the sentence here is basically the salesperson, der Verkäufer. Der Verkäufer. So, der Verkäufer führt ein Verkaufsgespräch. The salesperson conducts a sales pitch. The next vocabulary is das Angebot, the offer, das Angebot. Das ist ein gutes Angebot. This is a good offer. The plural, if you ask here, would be die Angebote. Die Angebote. Basically an E at the end of Angebot. And then we have, again, the salesperson, der Verkäufer, and now verhandelt mit dem Kunden. So, mit jemandem verhandeln is to negotiate with someone. Ja, so ich verhandle mein Gehalt, for example, mit meinem Vorgesetzten. I could also say that. So, to negotiate means verhandeln. Und mit jemandem verhandeln, that's the preposition mit. That's what we use when we talk about to negotiate with someone. So pretty similar in English, I would say. Der Verkäufer verhandelt mit dem Kunden. The salesperson negotiates with the client. Okay, and then we go to the marketing department, the marketing, das Marketing. Das Marketing. So here I would like you to learn a word that kind of is also used in German in English. So the social networks, you could also say that in German, but it's also very common to say die sozialen Netzwerke. Die sozialen Netzwerke sind ein wichtiges Werkzeug für das Marketing. Die sozialen Netzwerke sind ein wichtiges Werkzeug für das Marketing. The social networks are an important tool for the marketing. And then we have the vocabulary, eine Marktlücke entdecken. In this case, it's more like a phrase, to discover a niche in the market. Entdecken, the verb entdecken just means to discover something. But here we use that together with the market gap. So Marktlücke, die Lücke means literally the gap. So a market gap discover or to discover. That would be the direct translation. And this is how you use it. Das Unternehmen hat eine neue Marktlücke entdeckt. The company has discovered a new market niche. The next vocabulary is very important, die Ausgaben, the expenditure or the expenditures. Wir müssen unsere Ausgaben verringern. We have to cut, reduce, however, our expenses. Yeah, die Ausgaben. And in singular, it would be die Ausgabe. Der Sekretär bereitet eine Präsentation vor. Der Sekretär bereitet eine Präsentation vor. The secretary prepares a presentation. Die Präsentation, the presentation. This, I know this is not the most difficult word, but look at how we write it. We write it with the umlaut ä. That's important. And we also write it with a capital P because it's a noun. So also very important to know this one. Der neue Praktikant macht einen Kaffee. Der neue Praktikant macht einen Kaffee. The new intern is making a coffee. Der Praktikant is the male intern and then the female intern would be die Praktikantin. Die Praktikantin. So, and now your task is to translate this text into German using the vocabularies that we've just learned. So please pause here, take your time, take a white sheet of paper, write it down there, really make sure you invest some time in finding the right translation here, and then we will look into the answer. But this is a task that really only you can do yourself to improve your German and use the vocabulary that we've just looked at. Okay, so please pause here and then we will see each other in a moment. And the answer is this. Viele Praktikanten kennen sich sehr gut mit den sozialen Netzwerken aus. So here the plural of der Praktikant ist die Praktikantin. Manchmal dürfen sie sogar eine Präsentation vorbereiten, in welcher das Unternehmen versucht, neue Marktlücken zu entdecken. Oftmals müssen dabei die Ausgaben berücksichtigt werden. Don't worry if you don't have it exactly like this. The point is here that you use the vocabulary correct. All the little grammar and all those little differences in adjective declinations and so on. That's all fine. That's all good. That's maybe an exercise for another time. Here, the thing that I wanted you to focus on is finding the right vocabulary and putting the sentences in the right structure. So I hope you've done that. If not, just look at the English one again and try to do it again until you have a similar sentence to what I have. Cool. All right, so now we do der Verkauf. Der Verkauf, the sales or just sales. In this case, obviously, the sales department. Der Verkauf. Here, the verb that I'd like you to learn is beraten. Beraten means to advise. For example, der Verkäufer berät den Kunden. Der Verkäufer berät den Kunden. The seller advises the customer. Then the next vocabulary or vocabularies actually here is die Werbung, the advertisement, and Werbung machen. It might kind of means to advertise, to make advertise, but not to create the advertisement, but to spread the word, to actually have clients hearing your product. Werbung machen, to advertise your product. For example, das Unternehmen macht Werbung für das Produkt. The company advertises the product. Das Unternehmen macht Werbung für das Produkt. Es gibt einen Rabatt von 20% für das Produkt. Der Rabatt is the discount. So there is a discount, there is a 20% discount on the product. Es gibt einen Rabatt von 20% auf das Produkt. The next one is ohne Gewähr. That's actually an interesting one. So ohne Gewähr means without a guarantee or no guarantee. Yeah, so die Informationen sind ohne Gewähr. The information that someone tells you are without a guarantee. For example, I oftentimes hear this when they say the lottery on TV and they are saying the numbers that got picked for the lottery and so on. And then at the end they say, diese Angaben sind wie immer ohne Gewähr. Those that information, those numbers are as always without guarantee. So they say that so that they kind of have the option. Okay, so we maybe made a mistake in telling you the right number, so you actually didn't win the lottery or something like that. So we use ohne Gewähr to point out, to say that something is without a guarantee. And now we have the last department, die Produktion, the production department. Die Produktion, production, or the production department. Die Fabrik stellt viele Produkte her. Die Fabrik stellt viele Produkte her. The factory produces many products. Die Fabrik. If you're wondering about the plural, that would be die Fabriken. So the factory. Die Fabrik hat viele Fließbänder. The factory has many assembly lines. Fließen actually means to flow, and band is kind of like in English, das Band, the band. So it's a flowing band, which in the German logic means the assembly line. Das Fließband. Die Arbeiter sind pünktlich. Die Arbeiter sind pünktlich. The workers are punctual. And well, as you know, that's an important thing in the German culture, to be punctual. So it's important to know this one, pünktlich sein, and we write it with an Umlaut, with the Ü. In der Fabrik ist immer 16 Uhr Feierabend. In der Fabrik ist immer 16 Uhr Feierabend. The factory always closes at 4 p.m. So this here is not a direct translation, as you can see, so it's a little bit more of a loose translation. Why? Because der Feierabend, if you translate it directly, it actually means party evening, the party evening. But that's not what it means. It just means the end of workday. So if you are in a German office, you might hear a lot, oh, bald ist Feierabend, soon there will be the end of workday. And if they say that every day and you don't know what der Feierabend means, then you might think, what, do they party every day? No, it just means the end of workday. Yeah, so der Feierabend. Okay, so, well, let's do a little exercise regarding the words that we've just learned. Well, the red ones are the German words and the white ones are the English words. I would like you to pause here and just find the right the right pair. Write that down on your white sheet of paper. This is an exercise. It makes your brain work. It makes you write down things and so on. So it's really good for you to do this exercise manually with a white piece of paper if you can. So pause here and then I show you the answer. And drum roll, the answer is this. Well, so die Fabrik is the factory, die Werbung is advertising, das Fließband is the assembly line, der Rabatt is the discount, and then ohne Gewähr is without guarantee. So, did you know all of those vocabularies? Did you learn some new ones? Do you want to learn more? There is attached a document that you can download, that you can look at, and that you can work with. There's more material, more vocabulary, more phrases that you can learn that will help you throughout this course. And now let's go to the quiz so that we can cement the knowledge that we've just learned. How to explain graphs properly in German. That is a topic that is quite often happening in the business world. And in this lesson, I will teach you how to use graphs, how to explain them in German. We will do a couple of exercises. I will explain certain words or certain key phrases that really help you to understand a graph and also to explain a graph in German. So let's go. And here we have der Einbruch, which is something like the collapse. Also der Marktanteil oder es gab einen Einbruch des Marktanteils circa 2 Millionen. So there was a collapse of the market share by approximately 2 million. Der Einbruch. So, and then how do we say that something is stagnating or the stagnation? Pretty much like this in German as well, die Stagnation. You could say other words like gleichbleiben or something like that, but just use die Stagnation. So, es gab eine Stagnation des Umsatzes von 2016 auf 2019. Ja, also die Stagnation, ganz einfach. So, and how would you say a sentence like this, that the profit increased from 2 million to 5 million? You would say der Profit. Zum Beispiel, you could also say der Gewinn, but in this case, let's say der Profit ist von 2 Millionen, that's how we shortcut it, auf 5 Millionen gestiegen. Der Profit ist von 2 Millionen auf 5 Millionen gestiegen. You can also say Euro. That's oftentimes better if you also say what you're talking about. So der Profit ist von 2 Millionen Euro auf 5 Millionen Euro gestiegen. You can say, es gab eine Stagnation des Umsatzes. Es gab eine Stagnation des Umsatzes. Der Marktanteil ist auf 2,8 Millionen gefallen. So here we don't say einbrechen oder eingebrochen, but der Einbruch, we use fallen. Ja, ist gefallen. Der Marktanteil, the market share fell to 2.8 million. Okay, so now I would like you to write me an answer to the following question. Wie würdest du die Entwicklung des Marktanteils über den gesamten Zeitraum erklären? How would you explain the development of the market share over the entire period? So again, the one in market share, that is the one in the middle. And so you are now taking a white a piece of paper and you're writing down a kind of like a little explanation, a little summary of how the market share developed over time, over those 4 years. Please press pause here, and then I will show you my answer, and then you can match it and see how your answer fits with my answer and what mistakes you did or what you did right. So please press pause, and I will see you in a moment. And here is the answer that I have. Der Marktanteil ist nur um circa 0,3 Millionen Euro angestiegen. Jedoch gab es eine deutliche Steigerung der Marktanteile im Jahr 2017. Danach ist der Marktanteil wieder gefallen. So in English, that would be the market share increased by only approximately 0.3 million euro. However, there was a significant increase in market share in 2017. After that, the market share fell again. So again, this is just an example of how I would describe this. I'm sure there are many other ways of how you could do that. But the most important point here is that the market share kind of like increased a lot in 2017. But over time, the market share just grew a little bit. That's kind of like the key thing. And this is how you could describe that in German. Okay, so now I would like to show you a couple of other vocabulary, and then, as you can see in red, I would like you to describe the chart, the graph, but in the passive. Oh yeah, but before we do that, let's take a look at the vocabulary. Das Kreisdiagramm. Das Kreisdiagramm. This is the word that we use to describe this type of diagram, this type of graph, which I would say in English you say kind of like circle diagram. Yeah. So das Kreisdiagramm. The next one is der Anteil, which we kind of had before, but I want to make a point here again because you can use that for your description then later. Der Anteil is the share or the amount. Der Vergleich oder just vergleichen is to compare. Vergleichen, to compare. And then mehr als, and then whatever percentage, you would say it like this. More than 50%, mehr als 50%. Yeah. Okay, so now I would like, and also you can see in the bottom below the graph, erstes Quartal, zweites Quartal, drittes Quartal und viertes Quartal. And then that's all the 4 quarters that we have in a year. And then verkaufte Produkte just means sold products. So please now pause the video here and try to describe this diagram, this graph, this Kreisdiagramm with the using the vocabulary that I just showed you. And if you want to make it extra difficult, put in the passive. So try to only describe it in the passive because we've learned that in previous lessons, and now is the moment where we can use our learned language. But if that's too difficult, don't worry. Just write it without the passive or just use it occasionally. Please pause here, take a good amount of time, write down the description that you would like to have, and then continue this video, and I will show you in a moment my answer. And the answer that I have is this. In dem Kreisdiagramm werden die verkauften Produkte dargestellt. Es werden die 4 Quartale des Jahres verglichen. Im ersten Quartal wurden mehr als 50% Prozent aller Produkte des gesamten Jahres verkauft. Im zweiten Quartal wurden mehr Produkte als im dritten und vierten Quartal verkauft. So here you can see a very common way and also very, I would say, eloquent way of using the passive. Yeah, so I'm describing the diagram using the passive, and that is very common in German, especially among native speakers and especially in the business world. Yeah. So, but besides from the passive, if you like want to learn more about it, or again, then just go back to the passive lesson and rewatch that lesson and maybe do the quiz with it, and hopefully then you're better able to do this. But basically what this means is, I'm switching now to the English translation. The products sold are shown in the pie chart. The 4 quarters of the year are compared. In the first quarter, more than 50% of all products for the entire year were sold. More products were sold in the second quarter than in the third and fourth quarter. So that's just like a simple explanation of the chart. You can make it obviously more difficult and more in detail and so on. But I'm just switching back to the German one. Yeah, so compare this one with yours and then see what is similar and what is different. So, and here we have an exercise for the end. This is a text describing a business situation, also like you can use that text to describe graphs and so on. I would like you to read this text, and also if you don't know vocabularies or certain phrases, please look them up and find out which are the right words to put in here, and then I will see you in a moment. So please pause here, and then I will reveal the answer. Okay, so now the answers are A, B, C, and A. So, viele Unternehmen achten auf ihre Kennzahlen. Many companies pay attention to their metrics, to their KPIs. Eine der wichtigsten Kennzahlen ist die Produkte, welche verkauft wurden. Besonders interessant ist dabei zu sehen, wann die meisten Produkte verkauft wurden, denn oftmals kann man daraus Rückschlüsse ziehen. So, besonders interessant ist dabei zu sehen, especially interesting to see is, wann die meisten Produkte verkauft wurden, when most of the products were sold, denn oftmals kann man daraus Rückschlüsse ziehen, because oftentimes you can, and Rückschlüsse here is something like you can have learnings from this. Ja, zum Beispiel sollte man vielleicht die Werbung erhöhen, wenn die Kaufbereitschaft am höchsten ist. Werbung was advertisement. Zum Beispiel, for example, one should maybe increase the advertisement if the readiness to buy, die Kaufbereitschaft, is the highest, am höchsten ist. Ja. So please read this text again if you want to, and try to understand each of the sentences and so on if there are some words that you don't know, because this is a good text, a good exercise for you to improve your German. There are many more graphs that you can use, that you can describe and so on. Those were just a few for you to really get the foundation, the basic that you can apply also for other graphs. To practice that a little bit more, we are now going to do the quiz. The passive should not be a dreadful topic for you. I know a lot of my students don't like it, and we will tackle this today, and I will make it clear. I will make it in a structured way so that you finally understand it. Here we will focus on the Vorgangspassiv, the processual passive, and it will be easy. You will understand it. So please be focused with this topic, because you need really your attention. So let's go and start. Okay, so let's take a look at the passive. Here we have the sentence, die Präsentation wird erstellt in the passive, and compared to that in the active, it would be der Mitarbeiter erstellt die Präsentation. So if you look into this a little bit in detail, you will see that der Mitarbeiter is missing in the passive. So in the passive, we are emphasizing that we don't know or that we don't care who is, in this case, creating the presentation. In the active, we say the employee or the coworker is creating the presentation. In the passive, we merely say the presentation is being prepared. Yes. So let's take a look into this slide. So here we have the passive, but we actually have two. We have the Vorgangspassiv, the processual passive, and the statual passive, der Zustandspassiv. The one that we will look into in this lesson is the Vorgangspassiv, which is by far the more common one that we use in the German language. So again, here we use the passive to say that, or to emphasize that who or what causes the action or the condition does not matter. It is not important. It is maybe even unknown. We just leave that out. So this is when we use the passive. So again, the same example that I just had here in the passive, we have wird. And in the active, we are kind of like exchanging the wird for the Mitarbeiter. So the passive is actually often used in the official kind of like government institution language. So when you sometimes receive those weird letters from the Ministry of Finance or some other institutions, then oftentimes sentences are used in the passive just because they're not saying who is taking care of something. They just merely say that someone takes care of your request or whatever whatever there is you want to talk with them about. Yeah, so in the Beamtensprache, the passive is used quite often, which is really important for the business German. Yeah. So this is how the Vorgangspassiv in the present is done. We have the verb werden, and that's the one that we conjugate. And then we have the past participle. And you might remember the past participle from the present perfect, where we say something in the past in German. There we also use the past participle, this GE verb, or oftentimes it has a GE. Like the example, das Unternehmen wird gekauft. So werden here becomes wird because we have to conjugate it. Ich werde, du wirst, sie, es, in this case, das Unternehmen, so es wird. And then we could put an object in there if we want to. In this case, we don't really have an object, so we just then have the past participle at the end. And here, the infinitive of gekauft would be kaufen, but we create the past participle, and that then creates the sentence, das Unternehmen wird gekauft. Again, we are using the past participle here, but this is the sentence in the present using the passive. Yes. Okay, and so here we have 4 of the different time tenses that we use in German in the passive. There are more, but to be honest, from my perspective, those are the most important ones that we need to know. Most of the time we use the Präsens, the Präteritum, and the Perfect. The Futur is really, really rarely used. So, but it is used. So I'm presenting you the 4 ones that are really important that we need to know for this lesson to master the Vorgangspassiv, to really use it in everyday German and also in the business German. So you can see here the different ways of how it's been created. The Präsens, the present tense, we already looked at. We have the verb werden, which is conjugated, and then we have the past participle, or in German we say that das Partizip 2. Then in the Präteritum, it looks very similar, but there is a difference. Instead of werden, we use wurde. And then that is also conjugated. Ich wurde, du wurdest, er, sie, es wurde, wir wurden, ihr wurdet, sie wurden. Yeah? So you then conjugate wurde and then use the past participle or Partizip 2. In the perfect, that is different. Here we use the verb sein, which is always sein. So no, it's not an auxiliary verb here. We don't use haben or sein. We always use sein, and that is the one that we need to conjugate. So ich bin, du bist, and so on. Then we have the past participle again, and at the end we have worden. We will look into example sentence to make the point more clear. And then for the future, we have werden twice. Once at the beginning, or like in the normal, in the second spot of the sentence. That is the one that is conjugated. Then we have the past participle, and at the end we have another werden, but that is in its plain form. It's not conjugated. We just say werden. Okay, so let's look again into the present tense. Here we have the sentence, der Vertrag wird unterschrieben. The contract is being signed. You could say that using the present continuum. Maybe that's easier. Or you say the contract is signed, because in German we don't really have this present continuum. The other version of how you could say that would be in the active, ich unterschreibe den Vertrag. But if I don't want to say, or I just don't know who is signing the contract, I just say, der Vertrag wird unterschrieben. If I want to put in more into the sentence, for example, the contract is being signed on Saturday, I could say, der Vertrag wird am Sonnabend unterschrieben. Yeah. Another example would be, die Besprechung wird verschoben. The meeting is being postponed or is postponed. Yeah. So here I'm not saying who is postponing the meeting, who is postponing the Besprechung. I'm just saying that someone is doing it or it's been done. Der Sekretär unterschreibt der Sekretär verschiebt die Besprechung would then be an active sentence. Yeah, so we have the werden plus the Partizip 2, the past participle for the present. And here we have an example. So I would like you to find the passive version for that sentence. Der Praktikant unterschreibt den Vertrag. So again, we have werden plus the past participle or the Partizip 2. The intern signs the contract. How would that sentence look like in the passive? I give you a moment and then I show you the answer. So feel free to pause the video here. Okay, and the answer is, der Vertrag wird unterschrieben. So here we have der Vertrag, so masculine, and so it is like he, wird unterschrieben, der Vertrag wird, and unterschrieben is the past participle of unterschreiben. Yeah, so there is no untergeschrieben or something like that. We have unterschrieben. That is the answer. We do not know, or we don't care who is signing the contract. We are not saying that the intern did that. We're just merely saying the contract is being signed. Now we come to the second one, the Präteritum. So this is kind of like the simple past in English. Here we don't use werden, but wurde. Plus the past participle. So here we have, der Mindestlohn wurde angehoben. So again, angehoben, the past participle, but instead of der Mindestlohn wird angehoben, we say der Mindestlohn wurde angehoben. The minimum wage was raised. The active sentence would be like, for example, der Staat, the government, der Staat hebte den Mindestlohn an. Yeah. So an here is the prefix for heben. So anheben is a separable verb, ein trennbares Verb. Yeah. So you conjugate wurde, ich wurde, du wurdest, and so on, and use the past participle at the end. Here we have another example sentence. Ein neuer Mitarbeiter wurde eingestellt. A new employee was hired. The active sentence could be like, die Geschäftsführerin stellte einen neuen Mitarbeiter ein. The CEO, the female CEO, hired a new employee. Yeah. So here we have wurde again und eingestellt, the past participle of einstellen. So now an exercise for you in the Präteritum. Der Geschäftsleiter kaufte ein neues Auto. The CEO bought a new car. How would you say this sentence in the passive? In the Präteritum. I give you a moment. Please pause the video here so that you can calmly try to find the answer, and then I see you in a moment. And the answer is ein neues Auto wurde gekauft. That is the answer. Gekauft, the past participle of kaufen or kaufte, and then we have wurde, as a conjugated verb. So I think this is pretty clear. Let's now look into the perfect. We have sein, as I mentioned earlier, the verb that we conjugate. Then we have the past participle, and then we have the worden at the end. Whew, yes, I know, it's a lot, but we will manage it. Der Vorgesetzte, the supervisor, that's what you usually say in German, der Vorgesetzte ist gefragt worden. The supervisor has been asked. Yes, I know, it's a little bit weird to say it like that in German, but let's go through this. So, in the active sentence, you would say, der Angestellte hat den Vorgesetzten gefragt. Just plain perfect, the present perfect, where you have the auxiliary verb to be or to have, and then you have the past participle at the end. But in the passive, that looks different. We always use the verb to be. We always then use the past participle, and at the end, in the infinitive, in the infinitive, in the non-conjugated version, we have the worden. Now it's your turn. The example sentence, try to form this active sentence into a passive sentence. Die Bank hat das Darlehen gewährt. Gewähren is something like to be granted, to be granted something. So the bank has granted the loan. How would you say this sentence in the passive? I give you a moment. Please pause here, and then I will see you in a moment. And the answer is, das Darlehen ist gewährt worden. Yes, this sentence really couldn't have been more filled with verbs that are kind of like, it seems like there are just too many verbs here. This is how we do it. We use the verb to be, in this case ist, es ist, das Darlehen ist, and then gewährt, the past participle von gewähren, and then worden, just as a plain version at the end. And now we come to what you've been waiting for, the passive in the future, or Futur 1. We use werden at the beginning, or in like the second spot in the sentence, in the conjugated form. Then we use the past participle, and then in the end we use the verb werden again, but not conjugated, just in the infinitive. Again, I marked Beamtendeutsch here red again, because no one really speaks like that unless you have I don't know, official letters that you receive from institutions and so on, then that happens. But usually I don't speak like that, and I don't think I've ever written an email like that. However, it's important to understand this, because you might receive emails like that, especially again if you are working in the business environment in Germany, or with German companies, German clients, and so on. So that's important to know. Ihre Frage wird umgehend bearbeitet werden. The first wird is the conjugated werden. Then bearbeitet, that's the past participle from bearbeiten. And then at the end, werden. Your question will be processed. So yeah, so that kind of means that we are processing your question in the future. Like we are doing that, or we will do that. The active sentence would be exactly like that. Wir werden Ihre Frage umgehend bearbeiten. We will deal quickly with your request. Yeah. So this is how you do the future. Let's do another sentence. Das Dokument wird überprüft werden. The document will be reviewed. The active sentence would then be: Der Anwalt wird das Dokument überprüfen. Der Anwalt was the lawyer. Yes, so let's not spend too much time with this, because again, it's not that useful in your everyday German, but it's important to know it and to have heard of it. So here now a little exercise for you. I've listed on the left-hand side the word order, or the way how you form the passive, the passive, and the different times. And on the right side, I've put the times, but they're actually wrong. So you have to order them in the right way. And I give you a moment time for that. And you press pause, and then I will tell you the answer here. So again, try to find the right time tense for the right word order, or the right way of creating the passive. And the answer is this. The first line is the present perfect, or das Perfekt. The second one is the normal present. The third one is the Futur. And the fourth one is the Präteritum. Pretty easy, right? I know. If that was a bit difficult, then just go back again, try to put them in your head. It needs a little bit practice, because all those different wurden and werden and worden, that even lets my head spin. So just try to write them down, go through them a couple of times, and I'm sure you then will remember the right order. Cool. So now I would like to do a couple more exercises. Here you have to find the passive again, and I'm not telling you which time we are using. So you have to look at the sentence and figure out which is the right time to choose, and then you have to form the passive. So the first sentence here is: Die Personalabteilung hat eine neue Stellenanzeige aufgegeben. The HR department has posted a new job advertisement. Please pause here, take your time, write it down if you want, and go through it, and then I see you in a moment. Okay, so I hope you found the right answer, which is: Eine neue Stellenanzeige ist aufgegeben worden. Yes, it is the present perfect, or the perfect. Why? Because if we look in the original sentence, in the active, we have hat and aufgegeben, and that is definitely the perfect. And how do we create the present perfect in the passive? We use the verb to be conjugated, we use the past participle, in this case aufgegeben, and we use worden at the end. So eine neue Stellenanzeige ist aufgegeben worden. Let's do another one. Die Konkurrenz produziert bessere Produkte. The competition produces better products. Please press pause, and then I will see you in a moment. Okay, and the answer is bessere Produkte werden produziert. Just the present tense, nothing crazy. Werden plus the past participle, in this case produziert. Better products are being produced. Emails are super important. In today's life, you can't do anything without writing emails properly. And as in any language, there are certain rules also in German that you have to apply for proper email writing. A lot of the things are similar, so you can draw on your experience from writing emails in English or in any other language, but there are certain like special things that we have in the German language when we write emails, and I will tell you those tips and tricks about writing the right email in German. This will help you, this will open doors for you if you want to approach someone with emails. This is super helpful, this lesson, so let's go. Okay, so here we have the structure of a typical email. It is pretty much the same as in English, I would say. So you start with the salutation, die Anrede, then we have the introduction, die Einleitung, the main body, der Hauptteil, then the ending, der Schluss, and at the very end we have die Grußformel, well, kind of like the greeting at the end of the email. So let's look into each of those areas, because there are some differences in the, well, German language, or how to write an email in German, and I will guide you through those. So let's start with die Anrede. Here I just picked a, well, let's say typical email that I would write in German, and we look at the first part, die Anrede, what specifics we have there. So here we can say, for example, lieber Thomas, to say dear Thomas. You could also say hallo Thomas, but if you want to say something in the informal way, often we use lieber Thomas or hallo Thomas. But the formal way, we would say sehr geehrter Herr Mustermann. And I highlighted and read the ER because it changes when we then switch to the feminine. Yeah, so, but if you want to address someone with dear Mr. Mustermann, sehr geehrter Herr Mustermann, yeah. The feminine version would be in the informal, liebe Sarah, as opposed to lieber Thomas, liebe Sarah, dear Sarah. You could obviously also say hello Sarah. The formal way now is sehr geehrte Frau Müller. Sehr geehrte Frau Müller. And I highlight here the E because that changes for the feminine version. And that means dear Mrs. Müller. And then obviously we also have the dear ladies and gentlemen. And in German we say that sehr geehrte Damen und Herren. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren. So note this down. We have those three ways. Sehr geehrter Herr Mustermann, sehr geehrte Frau Mustermann oder sehr geehrte Damen und Herren. And then I guess the informal one is a lot easier. Then we come now to the introduction, die Einleitung, which is usually, like in English, just a sentence to ask if the other person is well, or if you write that person for the first time, you might say, what is it that you're writing about, that your request that you have to the person, or something like that. So pretty much the same as in English, but there is a difference in German, and that difference is the vielen Dank. We write that with a small v. Well, whatever sentence you start after the introduction, after the first after the Anrede, after the sehr geehrter Herr Müller, we always then start with a small letter. Why? Because it's like a sentence, but we just have a comma in there. So sehr geehrter Herr Müller, vielen Dank für Ihre Einladung is a normal sentence, and that's why, well, at least in the German logic, we put a small letter in the first in the second line. So in this case, that means thank you very much for your invitation. And if we address someone in the formal way, we also have to write the pronoun, here the possessive pronoun, with a capital letter. So vielen Dank für Ihre Einladung. And here we have another one, but here in the informal. So, hallo Clara, vielen Dank für deine Einladung. The V stays small, and we change ihre to the possessive pronoun deine, because we are talking, we are using the du, we are using the second person singular, and here in the feminine because it's die Einladung, and that one is the informal way of how to address someone. This is just another slide to show you, if I would put the vielen Dank für Ihre E-Mail next to the sehr geehrte Frau Müller, then you would see it's kind of like one sentence, and that's why in the German logic we start the V from vielen Dank with a small letter. And also Dank, we write this with a capital letter because it is a noun here. It says der Dank. Maybe that's also important to keep in mind. So here are maybe some other Textbausteine, some other little building blocks for you to use. Ich danke Ihnen für die Einladung zum Konzert, for example, zur oder zum, in this case, das Konzert, so zum Konzert oder zu dem Konzert. Ich hoffe, es geht Ihnen gut. I hope you're well. So please feel free to use those two building blocks for you to write emails. They are pretty common in writing German emails, so I think they're really useful for you. Now we come to the third part, der Hauptteil. So that's pretty much the main part where you communicate whatever you want to say. And I've just prepared some templates for you to use for the future. In this case, let's do a little exercise actually out of this. So pause here and try to translate this sentence into German. And also, if you look at it a bit more in detail, you will realize that it's probably best here to use the Konjunktiv 2, the subjunctive 2. If you don't know what it is, you just have to look at the other video where I'm teaching you about Konjunktiv 2. So please feel free to go back and learn that. Okay, so now we have a little exercise, actually two. I've written another email, but I put in 4 mistakes. Finde die 4 Fehler. So again, please pause the video here, find the 4 mistakes that I put in intentionally, and then I will reveal the answers or the mistakes to you. Again, so please pause here and try to find those 4 mistakes. Okay, I hope you found all of the 4 mistakes. And those are the 4 mistakes. Sehr geehrte Herr Müller. No, that's wrong. It should be sehr geehrter Herr Müller with an ER because it's masculine. Vielen Dank. No, we have a small V there because of the continuing of the sentence. The first part and the second part. And then für Ihre E-Mail, that is also wrong because we are using the formal possessive pronoun here, which we write with a capital I. Für Ihre E-Mail. The I has to be a capital one. And then in the main part, there is no mistake. And then ich wünsche Ihnen einen guten Start in die Woche. That should be the right answer, not dir. Why? Because we are talking to the person in the formal way at the very beginning, like sehr geehrter Herr Müller, vielen Dank für Ihre E-Mail, and then we can't just switch to the informal one. Yeah, so you have to be consistent. So that is the 4th mistake. I hope you found all of them. If not, well, let's try again with a second one. Here are only 3 mistakes, but well, they're a little bit, or one of them at least, I think is a little bit sneaky. So please feel free to pause here and try to find the 3 mistakes, and then we will see each other in a moment. And the answer is this. Those are the 3 mistakes. So the first one is actually, again, a little bit sneaky because I didn't put in the introduction. It's not always 100% necessary to put it in, especially in an informal email. Lieber Thomas, that is already informal. So you don't 100% always have to put it in. However, it, I think, is advantageous if you put it in. So that's the first mistake, that we didn't put in an introduction. The second one is I wrote hätten Sie, and the right answer would be hättest du, again because we are addressing lieber Thomas in the informal way, so then we can't just continue with the formal way, so we have to be consistent. So hättest du morgen Zeit is the right answer. And then ich freue mich auf not ihre, but auf deine Antwort. The same, yeah, so we have to be consistent and write deine Antwort and not ihre Antwort because we write an informal email. So as you can see, the structure in the email is very similar to English emails, but there are certain things that are special, and I hope that you've learned those special rules. If you want to learn more about it, then please go in the quiz, do the exercises there and improve your knowledge on how to write emails properly. And the best way to do that also is writing emails, just to practice them, to train them, and maybe find someone to help you with that. So let's go in the quiz.